Welcome back to Reddit Drama Unpacked, where every betrayal hides a darker secret, and every revenge hits harder than the last. Let's dive into today's shocking episode. The rain whispered softly against the towering glass windows of the penthouse overlooking Manhattan's skyline. At 45, Adrian Blake stood silently in the dim glow of the city lights, his broad shoulders tense beneath the weight of knowledge he wished he didn't carry. Years of service in covert operations for the CIA had molded him into a man of precision, control, and calculation. But nothing in his storied past had prepared him for this, the slow creeping venom of betrayal from within his own home. His wife, Serafina, lay sleeping in their silk-draped bed behind him, her auburn hair spread like fire against the ivory pillows. 11 years of marriage, a union built on passion, partnership, and what Adrian had believed to be absolute trust. But now cracks in that facade had spread like spiderwebs, fragile yet devastating. The ache in his chest was both familiar and foreign, a pain rooted not in physical harm, but in the breaking of something sacred. Adrian had known for months. In his world, ignorance was not an option. Suspicion was a survival instinct, and facts were currency. When whispers first reached his ears, hushed conversations at diplomatic galas, the too frequent absences, the growing emotional distance, he didn't confront her. Not yet. Instead, he did what he was trained to do: gather intelligence. The footage from his private surveillance system lay waiting on his encrypted drive. Multiple recordings, grainy but damning, of Serafina wrapped in the embrace of Alexander Royce, a polished assistant district attorney, a man who had charmed both of them at charity functions, a man Adrian had once considered a friend. But this was no mere affair. The meetings had evolved from stolen kisses into covert whispers, into strategies. They weren't just betraying him emotionally. They were planning something darker. Adrian stared at the flashing cursor on his secure terminal as new data streamed in from his trusted operative, Cassandra. She was more than an employee. She was one of the few who had remained steadfast since his departure from active service and the establishment of his private counterintelligence firm, Iron Dominion. Royce has links to the Cerberus cartel, Cassandra's message read. Multiple cross-links with Serafina's offshore accounts. It's not just an affair. They're building a case to dismantle you. Adrian's jaw clenched, his pulse steady but cold. The Cerberus cartel, the very transnational criminal empire he had been quietly investigating for the Department of Justice under deep cover, was now inside his home. The organization had already claimed the lives of 3 of his closest comrades, and now it sought to destroy him from within. Serafina stirred behind him. "Another late night," she murmured sleepily, her voice smooth like velvet. Adrian turned, his expression neutral. "Just dealing with the Dubai accounts." She smiled faintly and drifted back into slumber, unaware of the storm brewing behind her husband's eyes. In his study, behind layers of biometric locks, Adrian retrieved the flash drive containing weeks of surveillance, financial statements, and the damning connections between Serafina, Royce, and Cerberus. He studied every detail as though rehearsing for a confrontation that had yet to unfold. Suddenly, his secondary line buzzed, a secure channel. Only one man used this frequency. "Adrian," the familiar voice of Lucas Hawthorne, Deputy Director of DOJ's Shadow Operations, filled his ear. "We received your intel drop. This goes deeper than anticipated. The extraction plan is green." Extraction plan. Adrian exhaled slowly. That meant the DOJ was prepared to pull the plug, initiate arrests, and dismantle Cerberus. But not yet. Timing was everything. They needed full exposure. "Understood," Adrian whispered. "Let it play." 3 nights later, Adrian returned from a staged business trip to find chaos. His decoy safe had been expertly breached, not the real one, but the one planted specifically for this scenario. Inside had been fabricated evidence implicating him in arms deals and international money laundering. It was bait, and someone had taken it. He watched from the security feed as Serafina paced nervously in the garden, frantically dialing her co-conspirator. That evening, she prepared his favorite filet mignon, poured his preferred 18-year Macallan, and clung to him with forced tenderness. "The Maldives," she whispered, while refilling his glass. "You said you wanted to go. Maybe we should leave everything behind. An exit strategy. She was planning his disappearance. The whiskey was bitter, laced. Adrian excused himself, allowing the sedative to take partial effect while discreetly disposing of most of the poisoned drink. Hours later, under the dim bathroom light, he listened through the thin walls as Serafina whispered into her burner phone. "It's done," she said. "The drug should hold for 8 hours. Transfer the remaining assets tonight. The evidence is in place. He'll be arrested by morning." Adrian's eyes narrowed. They weren't just betraying him. They were orchestrating his professional annihilation. As the house grew silent, Adrian moved like a ghost. He secured his real files, informed Lucas of the developing situation, and prepared for the storm that would break at dawn. At precisely 6:03 a.m., the silence of the morning shattered. The front door of Adrian's penthouse blasted open with a thunderous crack, its security hinges ripped from their frames as a full tactical team stormed inside. Shouts echoed through the hallways as heavily armed officers in black riot gear swarmed every corner of the house. The bright beams of their rifles' tactical lights sliced through the pre-dawn shadows like razors. "Adrian Blake, down on the ground! Hands where we can see them!" Adrian was already standing in the center of his study, wearing only his black sweatpants and a thin, long-sleeve shirt. His hands were calmly raised above his head, as if surrendering had been rehearsed. There was no panic in his eyes, no shaking in his voice. The lead officer, a burly man with hard eyes behind his helmet visor, slammed him to the ground and twisted his arms behind his back. The cold click of steel cuffs locked around his wrists. "You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit international money laundering, aiding a criminal enterprise, and treason against the United States government," the officer barked. Through the chaos, Adrian spotted her. Serafina, standing in the foyer, wrapped in her silk robe, trembling, tears streaming down her face like a woman consumed by terror. But Adrian knew better. Her sobs were rehearsed, her horror meticulously staged. She clutched a file folder, the very documents planted in the decoy safe days earlier. "He's dangerous," she cried, looking at the commanding officer. "I found this hidden in his office. Offshore accounts, weapons sales. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know until it was too late. Please keep me safe." Standing slightly behind her, Alexander Royce placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Playing the perfect knight in shining armor, his tailored suit unwrinkled even at this early hour. His eyes briefly locked with Adrian's, the smug confidence in his expression palpable. Adrian said nothing. He let the scene play out exactly as they had intended. But inside, he was already cataloguing every officer's name, every procedural misstep, every piece of overplayed drama that would be their undoing. They transported Adrian to the federal holding facility in Brooklyn, where the media vultures were already circling. News vans clustered outside the gates, their satellite dishes pointed skyward, eager to broadcast the fall of Adrian Blake, ex-CIA, billionaire entrepreneur, secret criminal mastermind. Inside a sterile interrogation room, Detective Marcus Holloway sat across from him. Holloway was a blunt instrument, thick fingers, heavy frown lines, and breath that reeked of too much coffee and not enough sleep. He slapped a heavy binder onto the steel table. "Your wife has given us everything, Blake. Bank transfers, encrypted messages, offshore accounts. This operation of yours, it's finished." Adrian flipped through the binder without emotion. The evidence was impressive. A web of forged financial statements, falsified contracts, wire transfers supposedly linking him directly to Cerberus's arms deals. A perfect fabrication. "You're not saying anything?" Holloway growled. "I'll wait for my attorney," Adrian replied, his tone as steady as a heartbeat. 2 hours later, Adrian was allowed one phone call. He dialed the secure number Lucas had provided him months ago for emergencies only. "Blake?" came Lucas's voice on the other end. "I've been briefed. It's unfolding exactly as we expected." "They took the bait," Adrian said flatly. "Royce and Serafina have made their play. They've exposed themselves." Lucas's voice lowered. "You ready for extraction? Stand by. Let them dig deeper. The higher they climb, the harder they fall." 30 minutes passed. The atmosphere inside the precinct shifted. Officers whispered among themselves. Nervous glances flicked toward the interrogation room. The air grew thick with uncertainty. And then the door opened. Chief Harold Sullivan, Brooklyn's police chief, entered, accompanied by two figures. The first was Special Agent Miranda Cross from the FBI, a cold, razor-sharp woman whose mere presence commanded silence. The second was Lucas himself, now stepping fully into the open. Chief Sullivan's face was flushed as he barked at Holloway. "Uncuff him, right now." "But sir," Holloway stammered, "now." The cuffs were removed. Adrian rubbed his wrists, but kept his gaze locked on Holloway with an unsettling calm. Chief Sullivan motioned Adrian to follow him to a private office where Serafina and Royce were already waiting, no longer smiling. Royce's smug confidence had eroded. Sweat glistened at his temples. Serafina looked pale, biting her lip so hard it drew blood. Agent Cross laid a thick folder on the desk. "Ms. Blake, Mr. Royce," she began, her voice like a scalpel, "you are both persons of interest in an ongoing federal investigation related to organized crime, corruption, and espionage." Royce tried to stand. "I am the Assistant District Attorney. This is absurd." "Correction," Lucas interrupted, stepping forward. "You were the Assistant District Attorney. The governor accepted your suspension effective 1 hour ago." Serafina's lip quivered. "Adrian, I can explain." Adrian's voice was low, dangerous. "No, you can't." As Agent Cross began laying out the preliminary charges, the room's air thickened like a noose, tightening around Royce and Serafina's throats. "Ms. Blake, Mr. Royce, your conspiracy to frame Mr. Blake was carefully orchestrated but fatally flawed. Not only do we possess the fabricated financial documents you planted, but we also intercepted encrypted communications between both of you and senior members of Cerberus. Evidence of collusion, evidence of treason." Royce's jaw clenched so tightly that his temple throbbed. "This is an abuse of power." Lucas leaned forward, his voice like sharpened steel. "You're in no position to talk about abuse, Royce. The moment you accessed federal files regarding Operation Eclipse 3 months ago, you committed espionage against the United States." Serafina trembled. Her carefully composed facade was shattering. But he's dangerous," she burst out, turning toward the police chief. "You have no idea what he's capable of, what he's done behind closed doors." Chief Sullivan's expression darkened. "No, Miss Blake, we know exactly what Mr. Blake has done. He spent years risking his life dismantling organizations like Cerberus while you were selling him out." Adrian's gaze never left his wife's face. His voice was icy calm, each word slicing like broken glass. "You could have told me, Serafina. You could have come to me. You knew who I was, what I fought against. Instead, you let Royce seduce you with lies and promises." Tears welled up in her eyes. "I thought I was protecting my family. They threatened me. They said they'd destroy you if I didn't cooperate." "You weren't protecting me," Adrian hissed, his composure cracking just for a moment. "You were protecting yourself." He turned toward Royce. "And you? The friend who stood beside me at my father's funeral, who toasted my wedding, who sat across from me every week pretending to care." Royce's confidence wavered, but he forced a hollow smile. "It was never personal, Adrian. Business. Always business." "Business," Adrian whispered, eyes narrowing into slits. "You call feeding my information to a criminal cartel business? You call manipulating my wife into betraying me business?" Royce flinched. He could no longer meet Adrian's gaze. Across the room, Agent Cross stepped forward. "Both of you will be formally charged within the hour. Federal marshals are already processing your travel logs, financial transfers, and private communications, but this is bigger than either of you realize." She opened a file and placed photographs on the table. Surveillance shots of Royce and Serafina meeting with Leon Vargan, the elusive leader of Cerberus. Adrian leaned slightly forward, his expression hardening. Finally, the ghost had a face. Leon Vargan, the shadow puppet master pulling strings for nearly a decade, untouchable, invisible. Until now. Royce paled. "You're bluffing." Agent Cross shook her head slowly. "We've been watching Vargan for over 2 years, and thanks to your sloppy desperation, we finally have enough to move." She glanced at Lucas, who simply nodded. 2 hours later, Royce and Serafina were escorted to federal detention. The news spread like wildfire. The assistant district attorney and the billionaire's wife, arrested in an espionage conspiracy. Adrian stood before a wall of monitors in Lucas's private command center. Live feeds displayed simultaneous raids unfolding across multiple cities, Cerberus warehouses, safe houses, financial hubs being dismantled in real time. Bianca entered, a tablet in hand. Leon Vargan's off the radar. His last known location was Zurich. Private jet left 2 hours ago. Adrian's eyes narrowed. He's running, good. Bianca frowned. Good, he'll vanish. Adrian turned toward her, his voice low. No, Bianca. He's doing exactly what I need him to do. Because now... He tapped the monitor. Now I get to hunt him. Snow fell silently over the Swiss Alps as Adrian S. private jet touched down at a remote airstrip outside Zurich. It had been 3 weeks since Royce and Serafina's arrest. 3 weeks of following encrypted financial trails, intercepting shell company transactions, and unmasking Cerberus's hidden hierarchy. And every breadcrumb led to one man, Leon Vargan. Adrian stepped off the jet into the frigid alpine air, his coat billowing like the cloak of an executioner. Waiting for him was Bianca, standing beside an unmarked black SUV, holding a secured tablet. We have him cornered, she said. The surveillance team picked up Vargan's convoy heading toward his private estate near Lake Lucerne. The estate is shielded by a network of private security, former mercenaries, ex-intelligence, hardened men. Adrian nodded, his face carved from stone. That means they're afraid. They should be, Bianca replied. Lucas's voice crackled through the comms. Satellite confirms his convoy arrived 20 minutes ago. We've jammed their external communications. No one's calling for backup. Bianca handed Adrian the tablet. A live thermal scan displayed the estate's layout, multiple heat signatures inside, Vargan, his bodyguards, and a few key lieutenants. This is it, Adrian whispered, more to himself than anyone. At the same moment inside the estate, Leon Vargan stood before a grand fireplace, swirling a glass of scotch, his grey hair reflecting the flickering flames. Do you think Blake will come? Asked his lieutenant Marco, nervously glancing at the array of monitors displaying perimeter security feeds. Vargan smiled faintly. Of course he will. Pride is a powerful motivator, Marco. He's here for justice, for revenge, but mostly to see me bleed. He sipped his scotch calmly. But what if... If he fails, he dies, Vargan interrupted, his voice as cold as the mountain air outside. If he succeeds, well, then it was my time. Vargan understood something most of his enemies never did. True power came not from invincibility, but from the fear others had of crossing him. But tonight that equation was shifting. Night descended fully when Adrian's strike team infiltrated the perimeter. Silenced weapons hissed in the dark as guards dropped one by one. Drones hummed above like ghostly sentinels, feeding real-time footage to Adrian's HUD. Bianca's voice came softly through the earpiece. Outer perimeter neutralized. You're clear to move. Adrian approached the estate like a wraith, his every step calculated. No anger, no panic, only precision. Inside, Vargan watched the feeds black out one by one. It's begun, Marco whispered, panic finally seeping into his voice. Yes, it has, Vargan whispered back. But there was no fear in his eyes, only curiosity. He wanted to see the man who had dismantled his empire face to face. The final confrontation came in the Grand Library, a cathedral of old wood, leather-bound books, and suffocating tension. Adrian entered alone, lowering his silenced pistol but keeping it at the ready. Vargan stood across the room, hands clasped behind his back, as if hosting a private dinner. Adrian Blake, Vargan greeted, his voice smooth. We finally meet without shadows between us. No more proxies, no more masks, Adrian answered, his voice steady. Only truth. Vargan chuckled. Truth is fluid, my dear boy. You see a villain. I see an architect. Without men like me, chaos would reign. Every world power plays this game. They just pretend they don't. You manipulated my wife. You ordered the deaths of my team. You corrupted men who once called me friend. Adrian's voice trembled slightly, not from fear, but from barely contained fury. Because I saw your potential, Vargan said. You could have ruled beside me. I came here for one reason, Adrian said, stepping closer. Not to negotiate. Not for revenge, for justice. Vargan's smirk faltered for the first time. "Bianca," Adrian spoke into his comms, "secure the vault." Hidden doors in the estate began sliding open as federal agents stormed in, led by Lucas and Bianca. Tactical units secured the lieutenants and collected crates of evidence: bank records, offshore accounts, files implicating government officials, foreign dignitaries, arms dealers. Vargan's empire collapsed before his eyes. Adrian stepped even closer now, only inches from the man. "You had years to destroy me," Adrian whispered. "You failed. Now you'll face every soul you betrayed, in court." Vargan's eyes narrowed. "They'll try to bury me quietly." "Maybe," Adrian admitted, "but I promise you, every night in your cell, you'll remember tonight, the night you stopped being the hunter." And with a final nod, Adrian turned away as agents secured Vargan in cuffs. As dawn broke over the snowy peaks, Adrian stood outside, breathing in the cold, pure air. Bianca approached silently. "It's over," she said softly. "No," Adrian replied. "It's only beginning. Now comes the rebuilding." He glanced at the rising sun, a symbol of second chances. And for the first time in years, Adrian Blake allowed himself something rare: hope. The federal tribunal room was heavy with tension as the most high-profile criminal trial of the decade commenced. Dozens of international journalists filled the gallery. Behind them, dignitaries from multiple governments watched in nervous anticipation. For the first time in years, the public eye stared directly into the dark abyss known as Cerberus. Adrian Blake sat silently behind the prosecution team, dressed sharply in a black-tailored suit. His face was unreadable, but his eyes burned with a cold, contained fire. This wasn't just justice, it was surgical revenge, executed through the very system his enemies thought they controlled. Leon Vargan sat in the defendant's chair, hands cuffed, his once dominant aura now reduced to a withered shell. Gone was the untouchable kingpin of the underworld. Before the court stood a man stripped of all his power, facing charges so vast they spanned dozens of countries and thousands of victims. At the witness stand, Bianca testified with unflinching precision, detailing Cerberus's financial empire, its network of corrupted officials, assassins, and bribed politicians. Next came Lucas, who exposed the tangled web of foreign arms trades, political blackmail, and government manipulation Cerberus had orchestrated for nearly 2 decades. And then Laurel took the stand. She entered the room flanked by federal agents, her wrists shackled. Her once vibrant beauty had faded, replaced by sunken eyes and hollow cheeks. Facing Adrian for the first time since her betrayal, her voice trembled. I was recruited by Leon Vargan 9 years ago," she confessed, her voice cracking. "He assigned me to target Adrian, to enter his life, earn his trust, and monitor his operations." She struggled to continue, glancing at Adrian, who stared back with steely detachment. "I fell in love with him, but when Cerberus demanded more, She paused, tears streaming down her face. "I was too afraid to leave. I thought I could protect Adrian by staying close to him." "By manipulating him?" the prosecutor pressed. Laurel lowered her head. "Yes." "And did you conspire with Troy to fabricate evidence against your husband?" "Yes." Her confession rippled through the court like a sonic boom. Troy Merrick, now a broken man in his own right, sat slumped beside Vargan. His plea deal had reduced his sentence in exchange for full cooperation, but his career, his power, and his reputation were irrevocably destroyed. When the prosecution rested, the defense team barely offered a rebuttal. The mountain of evidence was insurmountable. The verdict came swiftly. On all counts of conspiracy, treason, terrorism, and murder, we find the defendants guilty. As the sentence was read, Vargan's hollow gaze remained locked on Adrian. There was no rage in his stare, only the bitter recognition that he had lost to the very man he once sought to control. Laurel sobbed as she was led away. Troy's eyes were empty, defeated. The courtroom erupted in whispers as the judge finalized the sentencing. Life imprisonment without parole for Vargan, 30 years for Laurel, and 25 years for Troy. Weeks later, Adrian stood again on the Oregon coast, his sanctuary. The sea breeze whipped against his face as Bianca joined him, handing him a glass of whiskey. "It's over," she said softly. Adrian took a long sip. "No, it's only over for them. For me, it's the beginning of something different." He turned, watching the crashing waves. "You could disappear now," Bianca suggested. "Start fresh somewhere." Adrian smiled faintly. "I don't want to disappear. I want to rebuild. Not just for myself, but for everyone who fell because of them." Bianca nodded, respecting his resolve. "And Laurel?" she asked quietly. Adrian's face hardened for a brief moment. "Some debts cannot be forgiven." The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in crimson and gold. Adrian raised his glass one final time. "To those we lost, and to the ones who will never hurt anyone again." The wind carried his words out to sea as night fell. The hunter had prevailed.